Nau mai ki tēnei puni I pāho. Welcome to this episode of Tū Couple Tū Kōrero. Join Ari and I, Vinny, as we navigate love and life as partners and our wawata, our dreams for language within the home. It's Epi 4 and we are stoked to introduce to you some friends of ours, Hollie Smith and Liki Finau. These two wonderful humans are raising their baby Te Oti in Tongan, Māori and English. For Ari and I, who are so new to this as a family, these are the kinds of people we revere and respect the most because they're actually doing it with their babies. So today we'll hear about how they go about language in the home, which parts are planned and which are organic, where do they get their language support from, and what are some of their best language moments. In this episode, you'll hear the phrase, he aha te wawata, what's the dream? And this sentence structure is really handy. You can replace wawata with other words. He aha te wawata, what's the dream? He aha te kai, what's for kai? He aha te rongoa, what's the remedy? Alright, listen out for all that and more on this episode of Tū Couple Tū Kōrero.
Tonga, me kolokonu kunuku o halonga mawa.
Tēnā kōrua, tēnā tātou. He uri tēnei no ngā iwi I te tau ihu o te waka, arā no Ngāti Rāua, no Rangitāne o Wairau, no Ngāti Kuia, whakapeti atu rā kia Pautini Ngaitahu, arā hoki mai ki tika Māui, no ngā iwi I te puta ki o matua te mana ko Ngāti Tama Kōpiri, arā ko whanganui nui tonu, ka mutu ko Ngāti Kahungunu anō hoki, ko Hollie Smith aho.
The idea of having I don't know if you want like one parent one language type setting, was that something that you had talked about before? Was it something that had already resonated with you both? Like when this time comes, this is what we're going to do? Or was it just a pattern that you fell into, or did you say to each other, how they will look, this is our language plan, this is our language unit, this is what we'll, like us with planners, and we like to do those kinds of things, but they're all theoretical, those things that you talked about, or?
When Hollie got pregnant, she kind of just said, just kind of like, almost like an ultimatum.
No, it wasn't.
She did it!
A
little bit caught off guard. I was like, she's like, we're speaking, Reo Māori and Reo Tongan and when we raise our baby, right? And
that's a question.
Yeah, I was caught off guard because obviously the previous 10 years, she only ever spoke Māori to her friends, and she had a reo community. She went to like 2 or 3 kōreros pretty much everywhere. She did Kiritanga, went on the Tira Haides and all that. So after 10 years, you just have to assume that's if you've been to 10 years and you still haven't figured out that this is actually the default, you probably haven't been paying attention. So when she did say to me, I just said to her, I just assumed that was going to be the case already anyway. Like that's one of the things that I loved about Hollie was her passion for Reo Māori and all that. So when she said it didn't have to be said. So for me, it was just kind of like, okay, so how am I going to fit Tongan into this? But it wasn't really, we didn't really plan it kind of per se. It was just like, all right, we've made the decision, so we'll just do it everywhere we can. And I think where we found the most challenge probably was kind of like curating as media, like programming and stuff. Because with books, even when we did have English-speaking books, I just translated on the fly into Tongan, and likewise with the Reo Māori books. And then even when we went to friends and family, we'd remind them that we only speak Tongan to our son. And that was a bit of an adjustment period for our family.
It still is a little bit.
It still is, yeah.
Yeah.
But because we were both fluent, I guess, my views, because I'm fluent in Tongan, Hollie's fluent in Reo Māori, we weren't really learning our languages, so we could afford to just speak it everywhere we went. And it was more so trying to work out, okay, well, how do we get them to interact with the world around us that don't speak our languages or whatever. So that's kind of where we had to really think about it. We speak English to each other all the time around him.
Yes.
For some reason, he just never picked up on it. Like, he just, only in the last maybe 3 or 4 months, he started to really kind of listen to us when we speak to each other. And then, like, only in the last maybe 2 or 3 months, he picked up the I love you, And he'd be like, I love you. And he like, the first time he said it to Holly, he said it, and he like looked at her like smiling, like waiting for a reaction. She was like, where'd you get that from? And he's like, from Papa? You're like, Papa doesn't speak like that.
What do you do in those moments? Because like in one sense it's like this expression of love from your child.
Yeah.
But it's in a language that you're not expecting or that you have a preference for. A different one, like, can we ask, what do you do?
Well, we laugh about it when he does, because he knows like what 5 sentences in English.
Yeah, and he picked up on counting off toys, because most toys are in English.
Yeah.
But I think it's like been observing and it's how he picks up on sounds and then like figures out the context of how he's seen it used, and then he'll like test it a little bit, which is what he did when he hears Liki say I love you to me, and then when he tried to do it with me, I think he just thinks it was a bunch of sounds strung together regularly, and he tried it out with me to see how it is.
That you say like when someone's leaving. So it was when you were leaving the house, I think, and he just called it out to you.
Yeah, and it was like, and it sounded like very broken. It wasn't natural, but you could hear what he was saying, and I was like, oh, so in those situations, like I've definitely like, oh, ka pai, ka whakanui o ia, because he's really trying. He thinks it's quite a trick, like he's picking up on like how to pull together these different sounds and like convey a message. He doesn't know that we've done our best to try and protect him from eventually getting to that language, which is fine, but we're just trying to make sure we prioritise his Tongan and his te reo context, horopaki, living those languages first, and kind of tuākana mai te reo Pākehā. So definitely, like, I try to like congratulate him because I don't want to deter his curiosity and how proud he is of picking up on like how he speaks English. But I think we might underestimate, so you just reminded me that we speak English to each other in the home, and then I speak Māori to our son, he speaks Tongan, but I think we underestimate his comprehension. He just hasn't been able to piece together all the different words to make them into sentences like he has with our languages we use to him. I think about, like, so Liki it's his first language, he reo te kāinga, he reo te whānau, tōna reo tonga, pakeke mai koe I konei, I hoki atu ki tonga, ki reira, I rumakina ki te reo tonga mo te tiki tau I te kura, I mea mai koe I pakari atu tō reo, I aiki e te I tōkinga mai. So when you came back from that 1 year over and you went to school, you know how you mentioned, people commented on like how much that immersion just kind of, I suppose, advanced maybe your reo.
Yeah.
But maybe by comparison, so I just, by comparison, like I didn't go to kohanga or kura kaupapa, English medium schools, and he reo ako taku reo. So I have pursued different avenues in wānanga, iwi, kōrero, whare wānanga. So I have had that benefit as well. So I've been, in the different environments that you learn te reo. I think regardless, there are some things that can always bring you back to like a joint space, I suppose. So Liki's whānau do speak Tongan, and mine predominantly speak English. And it's negotiating those spaces as well, and sometimes preempting them. Those whānau relationships, you might already be set in the ways and how they roll. And āhua tōmuri ka māua whakatau ka whare pāhara ki māua, compared to others in our whānau, So we kind of decided late in the piece that we would have a whānau. And the norms maybe that are already set within your siblings or what have you, you're always learning off others, like how a parent or auntie or uncle, and then when it comes along to determining making decisions for areas which you can kind of manage or control, you're always working off advice from others, but also knowing that we might do things a little bit differently. So when you go into their spaces, it's just trying to see how are you able to help maintain this for ours. And our whānau has been amazing because it's a total change for us, but not necessarily for how you guys were raised.
Yeah, the whole planning thingy, like I remember making YouTube playlists of only Tongan and Māori language videos, and really trying hard not to include ones that were bilingual. So I was just trying to find pure Tongan ones or pure real Māori ones. And it was really hard to find a lot of Tongan, only Tongan, because a lot of it was like saying, you know, the number one is taha, or, you know, like, and we didn't want any English in those. So just trying to find those playlists and stuff was really difficult. But that was probably where a lot of the planning went, was just into what was he gonna watch on TV, what we're gonna read to him in bed and stuff like that.
You know, you're kind of constantly role modeling, remodeling. Role modeling, remodeling. When you know better, you do better. And so I think you might be constantly changing some habits, but ultimately it's still anchored to some values that you're living out through these actions. So I was going back to your example of how there is a total imbalance with what resource, and we're so lucky. Like, I don't know how people had whare and tamaiti kōrero Māori prior to Pepe Ma, etc. There's a real imbalance of what we could access for our son online, and so for birthday presents, like Liki asked his siblings if they could just like make a song or something in Tongan, and so they would make pretty cool video clips.
They did instead of asking for presents, we asked, can you guys just do your favourite song or play in Tongan and record it, which they did, which was really cool. So there's like the alphabet songs and the counting songs, the head, shoulders, knees and toes in Tongan and stuff, and crack up graphics, you know. Like it's them, and then they've got like pictures of like Māui and stuff superimposed. They're gonna be really funny to watch in like 10 years time when the kids are all older.
Like teenagers.
Yeah.
It's so embarrassing.
We talk a lot in Māori language settings about, you know, raising your babies in te reo. We talk a lot about moia te reo, moia te reo, moia te raukura. There's all those kinds of like whakaaomarama out there, and we have talked about this ourselves on the podcast because we have, you know, Ari is Māori, Tokengao, I'm Māori, and we have not that experience of, you know, finding a Māori speaking partner and things like that. Are those things that either of you thought about for your languages? Like, was there a time where you thought, I must find a partner who speaks my language, or was that never a thing that you thought about? Because we had a cool chat about it, and I would love to know what you thought.
All Tongan parents are like that. You have to find a Tongan wife or husband because they're familiar with, like, you know, our tika and stuff like that, also the language. If you aren't married, your parents are definitely asking you, like, you know, which kind of just made me like dig at my feet even more. Like, I'm not gonna marry one, like, you know. But oh man, I think I'm No, it didn't really. Even though I speak Tongan and stuff like that, I guess I didn't have the passion or whatever for it, or it was something that was in the back of my mind as it was going to be like a real cornerstone of like my family, bring them. I've said it to Hollie a couple of times. A lot of this stuff for me just kind of happened organically, and that's probably something that's endangering our language is complacency for Tongans, that we just assume our kids are going to speak it because we speak it, our parents speak it, yes, our grandparents speak it. What I'd said to Hollie was, I think what my generation, and this is just my 2 cents, what I think my generation is going wrong is we're forgetting that when we were kids, our parents spoke Tongan to us and they spoke Tongan to each other, whereas nowadays, parents of my generation are speaking English to each other, and then they end up speaking English to their kids as well, but then they also send their kids off to English speaking schools and stuff. And the only place that they're really getting Tongan is at church, but then even then that's how it's being delivered there is probably, it's a different type of learning, But no, it wasn't really in terms of finding a partner, it wasn't really high up on the checklist for me, to be honest. It wasn't probably until maybe 5 or 6 years into being with Hollie that I kind of started to.
Long.
Yeah. The try and flee high phase, you know. Yeah. It wasn't until then that it was like, oh, actually, yeah, this is actually going to be a big part of our life.
So I was always in spaces where you'd probably have Māori language speakers anyway, but it didn't necessarily occur to me that that would be something that had to be a criteria. And I think like tā te tangata kawe I aia, he whakatinana I ona mātāpono, I ona whakapono, e rā mono ka whakaatuhia. Nā reira kei te whakatinana tana kē, te mea ka kōrero ki te ngākau, kaua ko te reo o te waha. So that was probably something that you don't understand, that's why it's great. It's compliment. But yeah, so it was really, wasn't even about a language, or a verbal language anyway. It was more about observation, because that's where I think you embody your beliefs and values and how you carry yourself. That got me.
That's a really beautiful answer and way more eloquent than I think what we managed to cover in most of an episode. I was just thinking about my language journey, and we have a similar language, journey. And there was a time where I was convinced that if my partner wasn't a Māori speaker, then everything would collapse. And then but that's because that's what was being fed to us, right? It was moia te reo, we've got to find a Māori speaker. And then you get a bit further down the track and you start seeing in the language community that there are people who are looking for just that and forgetting about the language of the heart. And it's not actually the greatest thing when you've got two people who are just with each other for them.
And not for the person.
But not for the person. And and then I think about my language journey with Ari, and our relationship has been so awesomely positive. And that's maybe my heart language, is that it was our shared passion for our languages. Wherever we are in our journey is different from the passion that is ignited within us through being together for those languages. It's not the proficiency, it's the journey that we're taking together. So I really love that.
One of the things that you mentioned that I thought was around regardless of whether it's tōkana, Māori, Tongan, there are probably some, whether you be aware of attitudes, habits, behaviours or disciplines that regardless it can apply, and regardless of where you're starting, because I just think of with how we've tried to, similar to yourself as well, when I was purposefully seeking out spaces for a speaking community or a learning community, and sometimes you do become a little bit of a reo course junkie, because and it's a great way to meet people, and I just said, the irony is we're kind of introverted, a bit antisocial, but in the language speaking community you got to go out and speak and meet people. And even furthermore, when you've got a son and you don't want him to just only have a relationship with mum and dad, you have to put yourself out there in the name of kia ao Māori, kia ao tōna whakatupu. It's not just the Hollie and Liki show and how we raise him. But what I wanted to go back to was when I was seeking out spaces to speak and learn, and I did do some in uni, I had great lecturers like Ria Tōmoana and Ruakere Holland, and we'd look into sociolinguistics and some of the dynamics that you have that are at play. And I know I have the benefit. So while you spoke about that as well, and you said it's all theory, it is all theory, and think called te whiako te kaiako matua, but it has always sat at the back of my mind some of the things that we undertake, and I have trust in the path that we take. I'm always reading and listening and watching and learning from everybody though. Ka huri te ao, ka rere ke. So, but I do think use the strengths you have, and that planning and background is absolutely a strength, because with the some of the concepts and the theories that Ria and Ruakere would talk about, I knew that was some of those Joshua Fishman, those concepts were what were used to manipulate Te Reo Māori to its demise. But we can also utilise those things to take the U-turn, and so we're actually utilising those for our benefit now, if we know how to, what kind of things are at play. And yeah, so it does give me a little bit more backing and confidence. We haven't been challenged much, I don't think. I've anticipated those conversations without a choice in like how will your son be able to speak with other people who can't speak English yet? When will he learn how to speak English? But I know from the earlier years of looking at these different things around, I'm confident with how we prioritise his world, try to anyway, from those things.
We weren't supportive of each other's cultures, so like I don't think we wouldn't have lasted. Like, so I think a big part of like having different backgrounds, culturally and religiously, and as long as you both support each other like wholeheartedly, like I think that's probably like one of the biggest things for our relationship, is that we both support each other, whether we speak each other's languages or not.
I don't think I've talked about it on the podcast, but before I met Vinny, my language, both my languages, were something that I'd always wanted to do, but I didn't put much effort into it, or I've had negative experience that kind of really put it on the back burner. I was like, one day, and then met Vinny, and he just ignited something in me that I'd never felt before, and I was like, okay, no more excuses, like let's get into it. And my son, because I had felt like that in my language, especially with my te reo, he didn't even acknowledge that he was Māori. I would be like, you're Māori? And I was like, no, Mum. I was like, yeah, you are. And then it took me a while to try and figure out how to get him excited or get him to embrace that side of him, and now he's doing like hakas, he's doing karakias, he's singing whaiaka around the whare, and it's literally in the last year I've just seen this whole shift in him that makes me so happy. And it's, it's not him speaking like sentences or anything, he might say a word here and there, but considering he's almost 11, this is the start of his journey, and like it's never too late to learn whether you're 11 or you're 50, 70, whatever. So even though it's small, that's really exciting for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think whatever works for you, I feel like there's no real time limit to it, and as long as you're not forcing it on your babies or on your partner, just whatever feels natural and feels good.
How do you both feel about, is it I need to not make my child speak Māori, but make them. Where do you sit? Because I don't know if there's a right and wrong answer. We've talked about it a bit.
I don't think it's about making them speak it, but it's about them living their best Tongan Māori life. So they don't see it as something that's isolated from cracking jokes about pātero. So yeah, I don't think in our situation it's been something that's kind of different. Yeah. And I do get though that point about, do we overdo it and put pressure on? And I do sometimes think about, because if we think about whakapapa and if we're the evolution of all those ancestors over time till now, things are going to change anyway. So we need to present our son with all of these options so he can embrace his identity, his tuakiri as a Tongan Māori, Māori Tongan, and there'll be no conflicting internally identity. He's all of that in one. And how that manifests in different settings might be just how he draws on like those different maybe etiquettes or tikanga in those spaces, but it'll be no different from, I suppose, us if we are like multiple iwi, and you wouldn't, you'd conduct yourself in different ways talking about your whakapapa when you consider historical events potentially in a mana whenua space if there are conflicts or what have you. So he'll be able to draw on those different things with his Tongan Māori Tongan identity, never conflicting over his languages or just, I suppose, negotiating, enhancing in specific spaces or times, those things. So we talk about going back to the pressures of when I think about where I started and where he has the opportunity to start. It's about providing him, yes, with language, but also contexts, people, I know that people thing, and spaces that just like totally emit te ao Māori, te ao Tonga, for him to absorb. So it's all through experience as well that he's picking up on his language as well, in addition to all these other things. When I go to spaces and learn as well, and it's going back to those habits and behaviours, and you always have your eyes and your ears open with all the mātaku noho ki konei ka aha, what am I going to do with what I'm learning? How can I either change up our lives, or how will our lives absorb what I'm learning, kind of thing. So I'm always trying to think like, what can we do with this? Like, is it whether it's a kiwaka or something, like just going down to some practical things, how would I use this in our daily life? And that's when I get to a few things intersecting here with, sometimes it might seem like a lot of pressure on a 3-year-old to be, just throwing out some kiwaha whakatauki, but in the horapaki, ka rongo i te wairua me te āhua o te whakamahi i taua kiwaha. He feels and understands like the boundaries or the nature of when would you use that? It's fun. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, like, with I don't ever feel like I put pressure on him to, like, you have to speak Tongan or you have to speak Reo Māori. I feel the pressure more on myself, and it's, again, this is kind of driven from Hollie, like, getting me to kind of think like, how do I make this activity Tongan or include Tongan in this activity? Like a recent example I can think of is when we're on a little road trip with two of my nephews and they wanted to play a car game, one of those, just to pass the time, and I think the words are like one marshmallow, something. So I was like, can you guys just change the words and say like one siaime, which is banana in Tongan. Like, use Tongan words. There's no reason for us to use English words in those games, and so that's kind of where I get to, is put pressure on myself to think about, okay, how do we change this into a Tongan game or include the Tongan language? And a lot of it's putting pressure on my family, which is kind of eased off now, but because they've actually got into the habit now. Like, the great thing about my brother's kids with our son is when I explained to them that our son doesn't speak English, they didn't force him to speak English to play with them. They actually tried to change their habits to include our son when they played. Like, so they'd use whatever Tongan they could, and if they didn't know anything, they'd come running and ask, how do I say, tell him to chase me? I said, turi au, and then they'll go run back to him and like, turi au, and now it's just normal for them. As soon as our son's around, they know, we have to speak Tongan to him. And when we've been at church and stuff with our son, if the other kids come and speak English, because they really do speak English, the 6-year-old nephew, he's like running in there like, no, you can only speak Tongan to him. Like, it's a real novelty for them that there's this kid that only speaks, te reo and Tongan. That just shows how it's not normal. He's a bit of a unicorn at the moment. But yeah, my brother's kids have really made an effort to grow their Tongan and only use it whatever they know around them. Yeah, no, that's been one really cool thing.
That's such a cool outcome for the efforts of all three of you to have had an effect on your wider family, to the point now that they are going, okay, well this is a thing, so I can do that too, or I am going to do that too. It's really, really beautiful. But I think it also shows, which was a question that I wanted to ask, and it's a language competition question, but it's not about language competition in the sense that, like, it's not like how do you compete with each other? It's more like, it's a really common thing for people who are thinking about like one parent, one language strategies to be thinking about the perceived negative sides that are always talked about with multiple languages in any space, which is the competition it brings. And so a lot of people stay away from one parent, one language and don't do it at all because they think, oh, the competition that it causes is too hard. So given that, like, you guys are awesome and that you've had this amazing effect on your, you know, other family, I wondered what messages you might have for other people out there who are thinking, oh, one parent, one language, I'm not going to do that because it's going to be too hard language competition-wise. But here you are, you know.
I think Hollie was probably earlier this year, eh? So he's 3 now, but I'd probably say maybe around January, so he was just a little bit older than 2, was when one day he just clicked and he knew that the 2 languages were different. And he knew that I only ever spoke Tongan, so he only ever spoke Tongan to me. Hollie was Māori and only ever spoke Māori to her. But then what also got us was, I noticed that when we'd go to my family, he'd only ever speak Tongan to them. And that was, I never said anything to him like, you only speak Tongan to these people. He just picked up on it that, oh, my uncles speak Tongan to me, so this is a Tongan environment. And with Hollie's side of the family, he only speak Māori there. But there was and I don't know how he came to that decision, but it's funny because my brother's married to a Māori and they've got 2 children. And they've got a daughter who's 6 or 7. But she's like, you know, she's into kapahaka, and so she's probably like the most Māori one of all the cousins. And for some reason, he decided he's going to speak Māori to her. Wow. And so when we're on holiday with them about a month or so ago, they were sitting in the kitchen eating, and then I just heard him turn around and start speaking te reo to her, and I was like, so he's just decided that she's Māori.
And he got it right.
Yeah, he speaks Tongan to the brother's younger than her, so he speaks Tongan to the brother, but decided that the daughter, the sister is Māori, and so he's going to speak Māori to her, but everybody else was, he speaks Tongan to her. So, I have no idea how he decided that. But.
So he goes, once we got a space at Kohanga, and when he doesn't know a word in Tongan, he's now got to a point where he just changes some of the consonants in Māori words to make it a Tongan word. And then I said to Liki, I was like, do you have ngalo in your language? And he said yes. And I was like ngaro, does it mean lost? And he's like, no. I'm like, well, he's just saying blah, blah, blah. And he's just like decided that that's the Tongan word now because he's made it.
Ngalo's like forgotten. So, so it's close. Yeah. But yeah, he's worked out that any Māori word that's got an R in it, you could just change it up for an L, and it makes it a Tongan word, you know?
It's actually really smart.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so hilarious the first time he started making Māori Tongan words out of Māori words. Like, jeez, yeah.
I was thinking of that language competition. We have had people ask us, what if he tries to play you off against each other or something? Yeah. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but I wouldn't want to use that as something and a reason why we wouldn't speak our languages to him. And I have heard of others not being able to speak their language to their child because the other partner feels like they don't understand. And that's when I would be quite hard on that situation. I suppose a foundation and values wise there might be a bit of a difference, but that's on you as a parent, and that's something you need to have a man in the mirror moment about, because if you have a shared goal about your child's tuākana identity and how they are, that might be something back on your own security around what are you saying to them I can't understand, but more about how can I learn, or so since we still speak English, it's our shared language. I'll be like, what did you say to him? I'm saying stuff like that, so he's still speaking Tongan to our son, and I'll just be checking in just to make sure, I just told him to go put his shoes on. Are you saying that he's wearing his gut boots there? I know that these aren't huge things, but just as a practical example, making sure we're not giving him conflicting instructions or discipline. So I do think there could be that competing thing when it might be a reflection on sometimes the parents and not the ultimate goal and what you're aiming for to support your child. And also coming back to hoping that we role model he is Māori and Tongan, and that those should never be contending or conflicting, not believing you should have like 50% of this and 50% of that. You should have the equal knowledge of both languages. It's always going to be a sliding scale or quite fluid with,
Because I knew that he was going to go to kohanga, so I thought, he's going to speak more reo Māori than Tongan. So one of the initial drivers for me to take up te atarangi and stuff was to learn Māori, so that when he spoke Māori to me, I'd speak Tongan back to him. And it was kind of the case probably for maybe the first 3 or 4 months, but then, like I said, at some point, he just clicked, this is actually Tongan. And so it just started getting to the point where I'd hear him say something Māori to me, or I can ask him, what's the Tongan word for that, or what's the reo Māori word? Or if you didn't know how to say something in Tongan, if I could see you struggling, I said, what's like the other day, I could see he was angry, and I was like, etita koe, that's like, are you angry in Tongan? But I've never actually said anything like that to him before, and he just kind of looked at me confused. I was like, he riri koe? He's like, aye. And I said, okay. Sorry for whatever I said to you, or whatever, come here and give me a hug, sort of thing. So that's kind of like one of the main drivers for me learning reo Māori was to be able to kind of help him translate words into Tongan, and that's probably what's helped grow his Tongan was me knowing reo Māori to be able to tell him, this is how you say it in Tongan.
There are times when you sort of like talk about being purposeful or intentional, and it's also making those, when you've got that guiding you, and when you have to make appointments, etc. We had an appointment, it was time for him to go to the dentist for the first time, and it's even having those types of conversations with asking and having that conversation, do you have someone that speaks Tongan or Māori? So putting the conversation, putting it back on them, so letting them know there's a demand for it, 1, and 2, do you have somebody? So you're driving that demand a little bit, and it wasn't until you asked that we actually do. They had a Tongan and a Māori speaking dentist, and that just meant that we had to be a bit more organised about how we made his dentist appointment, timing, etc. And I do think that that's a little bit of luxury that we have with time, that not necessarily everybody has to navigate that. In the back of my head, I'm like, I feel sorry for this dentist, because I bet they're the one person in the bottom half of the North Island, travelling around to all these, and then when we did meet with her, she said, thank you, this is really important to drive this conversation and make it's important. And when we got to his first dentist appointment, it was probably better than dentist appointments that I had as an adult, and because we called her whare and so he kind of put her in the fire zone. She's a safety even though she's wearing her mask and everything, he te kōrero Māori ki āia, and so
I love brushing his teeth with the toothbrushing.
We've got electric brushes at home, the little ones with Alps on it. But he wanted just this plain one that whare had given him, and he was quite proud. Kōrero whare yā koe. So real little maybe, but it's when you made that appointment, asked for someone that could speak Māori or Tongan. Did you have them first and foremost?
And we were willing to travel too, because originally the appointment was meant to be in kōrero, and then that ended up getting cancelled, and then she ended up having the appointment because we live over by the airport, so it's a bit of a drive, but for us it'd be worth it. Same thing with swimming lessons. We run different pools that ask if they do swimming lessons in reo Māori, and the only one that provided reo Māori was out in Otaki. They didn't have any running at the moment, but they said they're probably running them in the new year. And that's something that we'd travel for, we'd go to Otaki for that. We think it's worth it, it's worth the trouble in order to provide that environment for him to be able to join in and extracurricular activities like that.
We anticipate that English is going to be part of his world, and by virtue of us speaking to each other in front of him, it still hasn't necessarily settled on his tongue. But and that our whānau members, we're not going to exclude them from our lives because they might not speak Tongan or Māori, but we do ask what you do know, or and they do actually come with positive attitudes anyway, even though for some of my family it's a totally different experience, and it really limits on how much they can interact. But it is negotiating, but also that you're challenging some of these professions. I don't think you're actually challenging them. They know that it's there, but continuing to remind them that this is actually the future. So are you prepared for it? and that's our preference. So we are, continually kind of reminding society externally as well and driving that demand. And I think that's something that might be actually a pressure that we put on others out there to start seeking different avenues in the way that you support your profession. Because it definitely provided a way better experience for our son just by that one example, going to the dentist. So negotiating or navigating where we can support his exposure to Tongan and Māori, but knowing that English and other languages are out there too.
We have been through all our questions, which is really, really awesome. But I wanted to ask, is there anything like a little pep talk that you might be able to offer for people at home who are thinking about language in the home? They might not be parents here, they might be thinking about it, or they might be like struggling, as you know, so many of our whānau are, they've got proficiency but actually still really, really struggling. And I just wondered if you had any little pep talk moments for them just to finish up.
I think my thing is just being intentional, and being always vigilant, always thinking about how you can introduce your language to whatever activity.
Use what you know. Ahako he iti, he nui tonu tau iti. Use what you know and then it will grow. Being consistent, so that's that vigilant. That sounds a little bit like militant, but it's just really about consistency. It doesn't have to be about, hey, gotta care or anything like that. But so use what you know and it'll grow. Be consistent. And something that I picked up from you is te reo kia ngāho, and it's putting the fun in functional, because...
You're just full of proverbs today.
It's like, you could be creative. You could be creative, like this is my word man, like, hamangana kia ngāho, tēnei aho tango titihi wahanga te rahi maroki. When you're just trying to make things entertaining with a child, because it also entertains yourself.
You are both, all three of you are amazing examples of the goals that we have for our whānau. So just a massive thank you for joining us and being so willing to share, not just for us in our whare, but for other people who are listening to this podcast and really thinking, I want to do this but I don't know how, or I'm doing this and struggling. And I just think it'll be a really a revelation for lots of people to be able to hear what you're all doing and just how amazing it is. So thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed this epi of Tū Couple Tū Kōrero. How cool was that? Did you catch the part about getting your language speaking friends and whānau to record songs or videos on their phones and send them to you to use with your babies rather than buy them a present? That was gold for us, and I think it's something we should all think about doing. Let us know what you think of the episode. You can find us on socials, give our stuff a like, share it with your lovers and friends, and check out the links we post to the topics we might talk about on the show. We love hearing your feedback so long as it's based on a platform of high and reciprocal mana. Remember to always approach us as your friends and not as experts. A big shout out to te Matawai and the team at Ata, without whom this podcast would not have been possible. E te whare o te Matawai o Ata, ēnei māua e mihi atu nei. Thanks again to Hollie and Liki for sharing so many wonderful things with us. Mālō, aupito, tēnā rawa tūkana. In our next episode, we dive into a bit of a heavy kaupapa, so consider this a little bit of a content warning. We're going to talk about language trauma. Do come into that one carefully, fam. It's a deep topic that can invoke lots of emotion. We'll see you soon.